The Virginia election in 2025 is just a few days away. Election yard here. We've got some final thoughts and some gut predictions for the big races in the Commonwealth. Now, if for whatever reason you have not been following what's been going on here in Virginia, we've got some big races. We got the governor's race. We got the lieutenant governor's race. You might have heard about the attorney general's race. And then Virginia also elects all 100 members of the House of Delegates. The state Senate is not up for election this time. It will be in 2 years in 2027. So first thoughts about this campaign, which is now wrapping up. It looked like it was going to be a strong Democratic year in Virginia. It still might be, still very well could be, but a few complications have arisen, as you might be aware. Before we go any further into this, we will talk about some of the issues in the campaign, some of the things that have come up in the campaign, but first we're going to talk about the polls. So these were the independent polls that were available at the time of this recording a few days before the election. More may have been added afterwards. You can check whichever poll aggregator you would like to see if more have come out. We are only taking reputable and established independent polls for this. We're not considering the partisan polls. There have been a lot of them over the last few weeks in Virginia. We are also excluding some other independent polls, which are not particularly well established, or frankly, that I don't recognize. They don't have a track record. So we're going to give you three. The first one we want to get into, the Washington Post Schar School poll. This was taken October 16th to 20th. This one had a 54-42 lead for Spanberger, so 12 points. Ghazala Hashmi, the Democrat for lieutenant governor, she was up 51-44. But the attorney general's race, you can see a tie, 46-46. So that's 12 points of vote splitting right there. This poll also had a 42% approval rating for Trump. He was 57%, so way underwater. Interestingly enough, this poll also had some other goodies in there. 51% in this poll thought that Jay Jones should drop out of the race, but 54% say that Abigail Spanberger handled the situation appropriately. And this matters because, as we will get into, the Sears campaign and the Republican campaign in general made a lot of hay about Jay Jones's tech scandal situation, trying to tie all of the Democratic candidates on the ticket to it. Doesn't really seem to have worked. So unfortunately, this doesn't really split out the independent vote. If you look at the methodology, you look at the crosstabs, you don't really see anything like that in there. It would have been interesting to see what percentage Spanberger was winning independents by, because if she's winning by 12, she's winning independents by a good bit. You can, I think, presume that she's doing really well with independents. The next poll we're going to look at, this is the Suffolk poll, October 19th to 21st. This had a 9-point lead for Spanberger, 52-43. The lieutenant governor's race, they had tied 45-45, but you still see 10% undecided there. Whereas the attorney general's race, also 10% undecided, a little bit tilted towards Miari's, 46-42. This poll had Trump's approval at 39%, 54% disapprove, so 15 points underwater there. Another tidbit that I think is going to really affect this election, people talking about federal jobs being cut, people now talking about the shutdown. People are going to be talking about SNAP benefits expiring. People are going to be talking about other issues with regards to cost of living and inflation. Well, the federal government being shut down for almost the entire month of October, probably will be shut down for the entire month of October before this thing is over. 49% in this poll blamed Trump and or the GOP for the shutdown. This poll, unfortunately, also doesn't give us a split of how independents are voting. But again, I think if you've got Spanberger sitting on a 9-point lead, she's probably winning independents by a good bit. And then finally, the most recent one of the established pollsters to come out, the CNU Wasson Center poll, October 21st to 23rd. This one has only a 7-point lead for Spanberger, but still a pretty healthy lead, 50-43. She's above 50 in all of them, at or above 50, I should say. 47-45 for Ghazala Hashmi in the lieutenant governor's race, and just a 1-point lead for Miari's, 46-45. So some really interesting results there. This poll does give us a split by party, and it has Spanberger leading independents by 6 48 to 42. Independents go 44 to 44 in the lieutenant governor's race, and then independents going 46 to 42 for Miyares in the attorney general's race. So also in that poll, since we were just talking about the economy, cost of living, 18% said the cost of living was their top issue. 18% said threats to democracy were their top issue. But another interesting point here, only 4% in this poll say that transgender policy is their top issue. So now let's take all of this information and let's break it down. Let's break down all of the races. Governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, House of Delegates. Just a few days to go, so let's do it. So starting with the governor's race, I think we have to start there. I never really thought that this was Sears' race to win, and I still don't. She has never led in any polls since the summer, or really since I started paying attention to this campaign myself. I haven't seen her ahead in anything. Now, if you watched the video that I did at the beginning of October, I pointed out in the 2021 gubernatorial election, Terry McAuliffe ended September, entered October, still with a lead in the polls. But it was in those 2 weeks after that, getting into mid-October, and now we're in late October, but getting into mid-October, that's when Glenn Youngkin really started to close the gap. So I said, if Winsome Earl Sears starts to close the gap getting into the middle of October, and she catches up to Spanberger, then I think we have a race. And if that doesn't happen, then I think Spanberger is going to win. Well, guess what? Spanberger has been consistently hitting 50% across the board. Even as the rest of her ticket in some cases has been lagging, she has been ahead. Consider too, Abigail Spanberger's fundraising has just been stronger. It's been stronger the entire campaign. Sears has been closing the gap somewhat, but it's just probably not going to be enough at this point. Now, onto that point from a minute ago. That poll where 4% said that transgender policy was their top issue in the campaign. Winsome Sears, and you've seen this if you're here in Virginia, and if you're not here in Virginia, then I'm going to tell you. Sears' campaign in October went all in on two things, trans issues and the J. Jones text scandal. Those were, in many ways, her only cards to play. She played them. It's probably not going to help her. The text scandal is probably not going to help her out too much. And then on the other side, I don't really get the sense that a lot of Virginians are voting on things like trans issues with all the economic shit that's been hitting the fan, especially here in Virginia, especially for federal employees. They really tried to make both trans issues and J. Jones happen on a statewide level and pin all Democrats with it. They really tried to make both of those things happen, and I just don't think it's happening. We are, of course, going to wait until after the election is over, so November 5th or later, before we perform the necessary autopsies on these campaigns, as it were. But it just doesn't seem like this stuff is going to work in the governor's race. So, of course, there was a debate a couple weeks ago. We did a reaction to that. I don't think the debate, was necessarily watched by a lot of people, but I also don't think it was going to change too many minds. However, with that said, I really still don't think that Winsome Sears did very well. There have been ads running constantly by the Spanberger people, playing her quote, "I am speaking." And I think that soundbite just being played over and over again and how she said it. I think there's been an effort on the part of Team Spanberger to portray Sears as, crazy. And maybe it's working. I think the Democrats have defined her. I don't think she was particularly well known before this campaign. Because, look, you gather up 100 Virginians randomly on the street and you ask them, who's the lieutenant governor? A year ago, I'd be surprised if even 50 knew the answer to that. So, the lieutenant governor in Virginia is a pretty invisible role. So Democrats had to set out to define Winsome Sears. I think they've actually done it. The cited polls, if you dig deeper into them, if you look at her favorables, some of them had her favorable numbers pretty low. A lot of people still don't know who she is, but those who did tended not to like her. So maybe it's been working. Now, the Republicans, for their part, they have also been trying to define Spanberger. I actually don't really think that it's worked. I did see an ad recently, and I got to tell you about this one. It was an ad that called Abigail Spanberger extreme. It said that she supported policies that were evil. This ad had adult men bare-chested in a locker room with a young girl. And then it said that Abigail Spanberger was for child gender mutilation. And you can use that word. It was pretty S-tier scaremongering, I gotta say. It was a very intense ad. They threw a lot in there, but this is what the campaign has been. This is what they're trying to tie Spanberger to. Calling her an extremist who wants your children to be in harm's way. This is basically where they've gone with it. And I really just can't say that I think it's worked. So as far as Sears, as far as what she's running on as a platform, I was thinking back before I did this video, when was the last time I saw Winsome Sears do an ad about the economy or jobs, getting people back to work, protecting people's health care? When was the last time I saw anything like that? And honestly, I couldn't come up with anything. She may be running ads to that effect somewhere. I haven't seen them. So I don't know if she's running on anything like that. She definitely hasn't been doing a good job of messaging it, because I haven't seen anything to that effect. Whereas, for example, I'm going to use an example I talked about on the Blue Sky account, which you should totally follow, by the way. It's at electionyard.com. On Blue Sky, last week watching TV, network TV here in Virginia, I think basically every commercial break over a 2-hour span, there was a campaign ad by the Sears people talking about the J. Jones text, and then saying Spanberger has done nothing about this. She won't denounce it. Trying to tie it all together. That's what she's been running on. You just haven't seen her talk about the economy. You haven't seen her talk about jobs. You do see some signs driving around Virginia. It'll say Sears, Reed, Miares, let's keep a good thing going. But when you think about it a little more critically, she really hasn't been running, at least if you look at the TV ads. She really hasn't been running on her party's record. Meanwhile, you look at the other side of it, Abigail Spanberger, she has talked about things like abortion rights, yes. She hasn't made it the focal point of her campaign, but she has talked about it. She has criticized Winsome Sears on that, and she did at the debate as well. But I would say that the majority of her ads that I have seen have been about the economy and cost of living, things like that. Both ads that were pro-Spanberger and anti-Sears. If Spanberger wins, and again, we will do the autopsies after the election, she will have won by talking about things that people in Virginia actually care about in large numbers. Now, did the J. Jones text scandal, and if you've seen the texts, they're pretty bad. Now, did that scandal give the GOP a lifeline in this campaign? It did. But even at that, I think Winsome Sears, she was trying to ride that wave and tie it to Spanberger and try to sink both of them. I don't think that that's really what's going to happen. So now moving over to the lieutenant governor's race. This is the race that I think is getting the least attention out of all of them. So I'll have the least to say about it. This is even with the Republican candidate recently. He had a debate with an AI avatar of Ghazala Hashmi. It was as weird as it sounds. I did catch a little bit of it. It's kind of hard to take something like that seriously, but that's what the lieutenant governor's race has been reduced to. I have started seeing some Hashmi ads in the close of the campaign. Haven't really seen much anything for Reed. Now, Reed has been in the middle of some controversies. There was that controversy at the beginning of the campaign where some Republicans like Glenn Youngkin were trying to get him to drop out, and he didn't. And, there's been the stuff that's come up with old Tumblr posts and all that. It's come back around recently. He has denied it. By the way, Reed has denied all of this, but he's been linked to it in the media, so we're just telling you that this is what's going on. So my thinking has been, and I'll expand on this a little more in a few minutes, my thinking has been that this race will go with the governorship. I still think that that's the case. The polling for Hashmi has not been as great as it's been for Spanberger, but I think if you average all those polls together, she's still probably up at least a couple of points. Undecided still look pretty high on some of these polls that we cited. So I do wonder about ticket splitting for this race. That will definitely happen to at least some extent in the attorney general's race, but the lieutenant governor's race is kind of hard to figure. Maybe somewhat. I would imagine that anybody who's willing to vote for Spanberger and that wants to vote for Spanberger is probably willing to vote for Ghazala Hashmi as well. She's run a pretty inoffensive campaign from what I can tell. She's mostly been talking about things like education in the campaign. So it just really wouldn't make sense for there to be a ton of ticket splitting in this race. So now the attorney general's race. We got to talk about this. Let's start with this. If it wasn't for the tech scandal, I think the Democrats are probably sweeping the board next Tuesday. But now, because of it, it definitely has had an effect. I think that's undeniable. This is a real race now. There will be some ticket splitting. There will be some people who vote for Spanberger that do not vote for Jay Jones, or that actually proactively vote for Jason Miyares. I don't think that this is a clear-cut loss for Jones yet. Miyares has been hammering Jones hard on the tech scandal. He has also been calling himself the people's protector, but Jones definitely has fought back in recent weeks in ads. There have been ads, for example, that say that Miyares is basically a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. That is obviously trying to make a play to those Democratic voters in Northern Virginia who are waffling on whether or not they're going to vote for him. He's trying to remind them, hey, you know what? I think you're maybe considering voting for Miyares when you're voting for Spanberger, but just FYI, Miyares is MAGA, so you probably don't want to do that. So I think he has to do something like that. I think it's really all he can do at this point. So yeah, Jones and the Democrats, they were definitely caught flat-footed by this tech scandal, for sure. But I think at this point, the damage has been pretty much limited to the attorney general's race. Jones has unquestionably taken a hit in the polls. But right now, it seems like he's the only one who's taken a hit in the polls. Spanberger really didn't. A lot of GOP polls came out in the last week or so trying to give the illusion of a tight race, but it really hasn't been all along. So again, if the tech scandal doesn't happen, Jones probably wins this election and we don't think about it. He's not necessarily going to lose now, though. It really depends on how much Spanberger wins by, and by extension, how Democratic the electorate is next Tuesday, when you total the absentee votes, the early votes, and then the election day votes. I don't think there's a magic number per se. So, for example, if Spanberger wins by 8, then Jay Jones wins. I don't think there's a magic number like that per se, but let's put it this way. If Spanberger on election night is only winning by like 5 points, then I think Jones is probably in big trouble. If Spanberger on the other end, if she wins by 10 or more, then I think there's a real chance that Jones is winning the election himself. That would point to a pretty Democratic-leaning electorate, and if it's that Democratic, then I just don't see him getting left behind if Spanberger is doing that well. On to the House of Delegates now. The Democrats have a 51-49 majority right now. I think it's unlikely that the overall majority situation changes for them. So we're going to put on the sidebar right now some seats that we've identified as potential flips in this election. And I mean, what do you notice about these seats over here? Most of them are red. There's only 2 on here that are blue that we consider even in contention. So those 2 seats that are in any peril this time, Kamala Harris won them both. They have 2 Democratic incumbents, Josh Thomas in the 21st Prince William County, and then you got Mike Fagan's Virginia Beach in the 97th. Both of them might be swing seats in a more GOP-oriented year, but probably not this one. This looks like it might be a more Democratic year. And these 2 seats not really being super in play, it underlines just how bad the House of Delegates math is for the GOP in this cycle. So the Republicans' chances of winning a majority, they rest on flipping 2 seats that they are clear underdogs in, and then, on top of that, not losing a single other seat. Well, the bigger problem for them is that they're in serious trouble in several of these seats that I've listed here. On a disappointing night for Democrats, they might still pick up 2 or 3 seats. So, how much peril are these seats in? Let's talk about some of them individually right now. And the first one I want to talk about is HD 57. That's in Henrico County. David Owen is the Republican incumbent there. He won due to a big scandal on the part of the Democratic candidate in 2023. That scandal made national news. It was a gift to the Republicans that year, but I think it's going to be really hard for him to hold on to the seat this time. That seat in Henrico, it's like in the Short Pump area, and it also spills over a little bit outside of Henrico County, but it's mostly Henrico. The seat's been getting bluer, and it would take, I think, a minor miracle for Owen to win at this point against Democrat May Navarre. I'm not saying that he can't keep it close. He is the incumbent in the race. But if he loses, as we think he will, then the GOP's down to 48 seats. And then they need to flip 3 Democratic seats. And then you start talking about some Democratic seats that really aren't even on the board at all. Like, for example, HD 65 in Fredericksburg. Kamala Harris won it by about 9 or 10 points. And Joshua Cole, the delegate there, he won by about 6. Or HD 84. That's in the Suffolk area. That's Nadarius Clark. He won by about 6 in 2023, but Kamala Harris won that seat by like 14 points. It's just probably not in play. But then on the other side, the 75th, south of Richmond. This is in the Hopewell area. Carrie Coiner, she's in trouble. The 71st, in or around Williamsburg. Amanda Batten, the Republican, she looks like she's in big trouble there. The 82nd, Kim Taylor, South Side. She barely won that seat in 2023, might get toppled this time. The 89th, that's an open Republican seat in Chesapeake and Suffolk, and I think Casey Carnegie, the Democrat, she is in a good spot there. She's been all over the airwaves for months. So what are you starting to see? You're already starting to see that there are a number of Republican seats that are in imminent danger of flipping, but we can keep going, and we're going to keep going. The 22nd, Prince William County. This is Ian Lovejoy. He's a Republican. He's going to have trouble. His Democratic opponent is a former delegate, Elizabeth Guzman. She has just been annihilating him in fundraising and on ad spending. The 86th, this one looks like more of an opportunity. This seat is Hampton-Pocosin, York County. This one might be in play. The GOP delegate there, A.C. Cordoza, he's been tied to a few scandals by his opponent, and it was a Harris district. You've got the 73rd, which is starting to come more into focus. This is in Chesterfield County. It's trending bluer. The 41st, out in the Blacksburg area, this one might fall. You can see here, I didn't even go through all of them that I think are on my watch list. You can see that while I wasn't particularly bullish on Republican chances of flipping Democratic seats, I think at least a few of the seats over here that I listed are going to flip. And then at that point, the GOP has virtually no path at a majority. So let's wrap it up. Let's talk final thoughts. Just a reminder, if I am wrong about any of this, then this video was hijacked by ne'er-do-wells. And if we do well on these predictions, then I will accept your congratulations on Tuesday night. So I think the governor's race, let's start there. I think it will be Spanberger all along. I have felt like it would be this way. I think high single digits for a margin of victory sounds about right. You can call that maybe 7 to 9 points. I don't discount the possibility that it could be a comfortable win of 10 points or more, but that would really have to materialize in the final days of early voting and then the election day vote. Ralph Northam in 2017, he won by about 9 points, and that felt like a great night for the Virginia Democrats, like a benchmark night for them. Anything above what Ralph Northam did 8 years ago would just be a total rebuke of the Republican Party. I don't know if it will go that far, but do I think Spanberger is going to win? Yes. So to come up with this feeling of high single digits, I had to consider, in terms of vote share, where did I think that Winsome Sears is going to land? I think she's going to end up around 45 or 46%. 47 is kind of pushing it. 48 is really pushing it. Keep in mind, too, in basically every independent poll by an established pollster since the summer, she's had a ceiling of about 43%. I think Sears will do better than that, but I don't think she's going to do much better than that. Keep in mind, too, when you look at the polls for this race, Republican-aligned pollsters and internal polls, for example, they flooded the zone in Virginia in October. Even all of those polls had Spanberger ahead. So maybe by less, but they all had her ahead. I think at this point, even Republicans would probably concede that Sears is going to lose. So the lieutenant governor's race, this is probably Ghazala Hashmi's. I am less confident in her winning than I was Spanberger, but if Spanberger wins by 8 to 10 points, 7 to 9 points, whatever, in that general area, then I think Hashmi is probably also winning. It's a little harder to say, though, because this race has been an afterthought for a lot of the campaign. So I'll be really curious to see what the margins are. The Attorney General's race. This is a true toss-up. My gut says that Miyares might squeak this one out, but I cannot and will not discount the possibility of Jones winning. I think some people might be thinking that he's toast. I really don't think he is. I don't necessarily think he is favored to win at this point, but I definitely think he has a shot. He definitely screwed up. The Democrats probably wish they had this primary to do over again. If Spanberger ends up winning in a blowout, Jones probably wins too. I think tickets can and will split because of this scandal, but even at that, they're not going to split by 15 or 20 points. If they do, that would just be very, very different for Virginia. We just don't do that here. Some Democrats, I think, will come home when they got the ballot in front of them. Some independents will switch to Miyares. They might even leave it blank. And those independents, by the way, are probably voting for Spanberger. It could come down to the wire, and in this race might be the only thing that stops a Democratic sweep. And then finally, on the House of Delegates, final thoughts here. The GOP would probably need to pull an inside straight to flip the House of Delegates. The odds are pretty long. The math is pretty bad for them. Like I said before, even on a disappointing night for Democrats, they're probably plus 2 or 3 minimum. So you're already starting with a Democratic majority of 51, and you're just padding it at this point. Right now, I think the Democrats probably pick up 6 or 7 to get to maybe 57 or 58 out of 100. But the upper boundary for the Democrats is actually something crazy, like 62 or 63 on a perfect night. Now, I don't think that they're necessarily going to get there, but I do think 60 is in play if Spanberger has coattails. 55 plus seats, I think, would be a really good bet for the Democrats. So that's it. We will be back on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning or whenever the hell we know who's won the election to talk about the Virginia elections. And for more on Virginia elections and election 2025, electionyard.com. Like and subscribe. Follow us on social media. We'll see you soon. Get out and vote.